Greetings, friends. Sam Berchowski here, host of the What's Right Show, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian, behind the What's Right microphone. Robbie, I can't believe I'm going to start today. I got to get to this Candace Owens, Brigitte Macron lawsuit. This is bananas. What an absolutely idiotic thing for the First Lady of France to do. She may actually have a viable case against Candace Owens. It's not the point. This is just moronic. By the way, if you're just finding out about this, Candace Owens, a podcaster and kind of a nut, in my opinion, has been producing a lot of episodes, getting lots of traction off of this insistence that the First Lady of France was born a man, that she is in fact a transvestite. And I guess the president of France and the first lady there are not very happy about this. So they have filed a lawsuit, a defamation suit. Now, all right. So, okay, why? Okay. Well, first, number one, to prove a statement is defamatory, you have to, and you're a public person like the Macrons are there in politics, you have to prove actual malice, which is a very high standard. And that's knowing falsity or a reckless disregard for the truth. That's the legal standard. Now, you prove that, you also have to prove that you were damaged by this. And this is the part where I just think the whole thing's idiotic, because in order to prove that the Macrons were damaged by this, it's a progressive couple, right? France is a country of progressive values. The First Lady of France has to go into open court and make the argument that being called a trans person is bad. To me, I think that's a PR disaster. I mean, not for a guy like me, but certainly for somebody of the Macron's stature. Meaning, progressive, center-left politicians. So, that to me is, the first sort of red flag here. Now, the other thing I want to note about this is they filed the case in Delaware, the state of Delaware. And Delaware must have the most gosh-awful courts. It is the worst venue because somebody somewhere once upon a time decided that Delaware was the place where you incorporate. And the reason the case, as I understand it, was filed in Delaware and may very well remain in Delaware is because Candace Owens, at some point, her company, her media company, was incorporated there. And I don't know if you've been following this, but the state of Delaware has now for years had a terrible reputation. I think preceding the time that Candace Owens filed her corporate paperwork, has had the reputation of being hostile to conservatives, basically to anybody that is, making any amount of money in business. Remember what happened to Elon Musk in Delaware? He got his rear end handed to him by the judge there. He went in, he tried to get a compensation package done. The court ruled against him in every way possible. And it prompted a very public spat with the state of Delaware, which I think Delaware, the only thing it has going for it, Robbie, are some fish and chips places and the fact that everybody incorporates there. And smart business lawyers today will tell you incorporate in Nevada, incorporate in Texas, hell, incorporate in Florida. It's turning out that new companies, it's going to be a benefit for Nevada, right? I mean, companies will incorporate here, favorable tax climate, and our judges are not nuts, at least not all of them. So anyway, so that's a component of the case. And now she could, my friend Mark Randazza, who is a First Amendment attorney, he calls this, he says Candace Owens could get Alex Jonesed. And he made it a verb. He called it, and here's his definition of what it is to get or to be Alex Jones. And I quote, to be subjected to a judicial process so irredeemably biased by judge, jury, or both that a fair trial becomes impossible and conviction or ruin is inevitable, regardless of the strength of one's legal defenses. And this is obviously going back to the trial that Alex Jones was, subjected to. And as crazy as the stuff that he was saying, I mean, look, I think the whole thing was, in retrospect, was an absolute sham. And the damages were astronomical. And this could very well happen to Candace Owens, which on some level, I don't particularly like, because I'm a pro First Amendment guy, generally speaking. So this will certainly be interesting to watch. By the way, had Candace Owens just incorporated in Tennessee, where she lives, I mean, I would say it would be a slam dunk win for her, right? I mean, that will have a chances at a more favorable jury and even a judge in Tennessee that's largely conservative. I think, it would just be a lot higher is my point. So, and by the way, the First Lady of France, one thing that will happen is the First Lady of France now is subject to discovery. And they're not going to prove, I don't know. They're not going to prove that she's a man. Okay, that's not going to happen here. I don't think. But other things might come up. You can pour through somebody's, medical records. Because, the defense to a defamation claim is that is that what you're saying is actually true. Truth is a defense. So basically, any evidence about her, medical history going back a long ways is relevant evidence and is subject to court subpoena and is discoverable. Now, the judge could, limit that significantly, but that would, of course, also create, an appealable issue for Candace Owens at the end. So, big mess for the First Lady of France, absolutely idiotic from a PR perspective, and a case that is at best a wobbler, though she has a very good lawyer, Tom Clare, who is very well regarded. Tom Clark. Clar is how he pronounces it, I think. So anyway, interesting stuff. By the way, Hulk Hogan today passed away. Absolutely devastated about this, because I remember seeing him at the convention. And, Hulk Hogan, right? He stole the show last summer. Do we have that? We have it. Here he was. He got on the podium, absolutely electrified the room with this.
What happened last week when they took a shot at my hero and they tried to kill the next president of the United States? Enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again.
This was spectacular. Of course, I was in the room when this happened. Was a moment I'll never forget. Now, those of you not watching the Sam Cam, you can't see the video. And if you don't remember this, Hulk had a jacket on. He had a nice tailored suit jacket, a blazer. He took that off as he's speaking. And then he takes the shirt that he's got underneath it, some sort of T-shirt, and rips it, WrestleMania style, rips it, revealing another shirt underneath, a red Trump Vance 2024 shirt. The whole thing was just made for TV. One of many, many memorable moments, of course, of that convention. And so this is just a very sad news today. Hulk Hogan passing away today. All right, quick break. Sam Rajovsky here, News Talk 840 KXNT. I'm going to, I know it's back in the news, this stupid Epstein thing. I stand by what I've said all along. Let me explain to you what this is about. Let's dispose of it and move on. And I tell you, the more we find out about what Obama did in 2016, the more we see how the deep state operated every day since then, the more convinced I am that this whole thing is yet another hoax. I'll explain why. Sam Rajovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam and Ash 702-820-1234. Offices in Nevada and California, because you deserve what's right.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam and Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
Hi, welcome back. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. I, Sam Rajovsky, here behind the What's Right microphone. Happy to be here as always. Now, before we get to the developments in the Epstein file saga, let me just play here a quick clip. Candace Owens, the update is, of course, the lawsuit, talked about that a minute ago. The president and first lady of France suing Candace Owens over her repeated reporting on an allegation that the first lady of France was born a man. And you'd think after this 200-plus page salvo that perhaps Candace Owens would be backing down, but that does not seem to be the case.
You were born a man and you will die a man. That's the point I'm making. So give us a sample. I'll send my doctors to take your blood. Figure it out real quick, however you want to go about this. Hey, how about just giving us some pictures again of you growing up, raising your children? That would be fine.
If Candace Owens, somebody like Candace Owens was going around saying that I was born a woman, I'd laugh it off. I'm like, Candace Owens is nuts. I would never even dignify it with a response other than to laugh if somebody in the media was asking for comment. This is the worst idea, and it'll backfire on the first couple of France bigly. Mark my words. Now, I think another thing that's going to backfire on the political establishment is this persisting harping on Epstein. I'll tell you, the development here is twofold. One, the media continues to push a story. There's a new story out, again written sort of in furtherance of what was already put in the Wall Street Journal, that Trump is in the Epstein files, quote unquote, and that the two of them, Epstein and Trump, were allegedly at one time close. That's the story, okay? Now, for the umpteenth time, and perhaps you're just joining us and you've landed from Mars, if you're asking my opinion on this, it's that there is no dispute that Trump and Epstein were, quote unquote, close, however you want to define that. There is no evidence that Trump traveled to Epstein's island. There's no evidence that Trump, was participated in anything illegal. But the two of them were wealthy guys living, I don't know, at one point 8 blocks from each other in New York. They ran in the same circles. But I'll tell you, for example, and nobody wants to talk about this, that Bill Clinton had a lot closer of a relationship with Epstein, certainly. And there's no dispute that Prince Andrew, among others, had likely some form of participation in the bad stuff that was going on. None of that actually exists with Trump. Now, what we have found out, and this one of the things that's developing, is this idea that Trump is in the quote unquote files. Now, what are the files? Is it the Rolodex? Is it the, I mean, nothing is new. I think they've published already Epstein's Rolodex, and a lot of people are in it to imply you had regular contact with Epstein, that you participate or by default then were, implicated in criminal wrongdoing and the rape of children, I think is absurd. But the media continue to run with the story. They're not leaving it be. And it got to a fever pitch here where even, CNN, I'll play this. This is Scott Jennings. This was today, talking about the blatant disinformation about Trump and Epstein, hashing it out. Watch this, and you get an idea of where this is all going.
Just own up to it. Why doesn't he just do that?
Own up to what? What the Wall Street Journal calls unverified hearsay? Why should he go out there and have to own up to anything? He's not ever been credibly accused. The Washington Post ran a fact check on this the other day and said, we're confident there's nothing about the president. If there were, we would know about it. Unverified hearsay is what he's dealing with, and you want him to go out and fight this ghost? It's ridiculous. Democrats are alleging that he is somehow part of Epstein's wrongdoing. It's been happening all day long. This is the whole point of this fiasco, is to try to create a narrative and what he calls correctly a hoax, that he is somehow part of it. It's exactly what they did about Russia, and they're doing it on Epstein.
Here comes Anna Navarro.
And that comment and what you just said are two different things. So if you're alleging criminality, go ahead. Say it directly. Say it so we can all hear it.
I am asking you a question that you are pivoting on. The question I am asking you is, if Donald Trump knew that Epstein was having sex and preying on underage girls, is that wrongdoing?
Well, I think if anyone would have known that, but I don't know that he knew that because
I don't know that either.
He disowned it. But you're raising it. If I knew that you ran over someone out on the street, would that be criminal wrongdoing? You're raising it because you don't know if it's true, but you're saying it out loud because you're trying to create.
No, I'm saying it out loud because I think that's what a lot of people are wondering, because he does. The man does protest.
This is what we say when Anna's wondering.
All right, let me.
A lot of people are wondering if he's been doing it. My God, Anna Navarro, but I can't just dismiss her as an idiot. I want to. I was already going there. She is an idiot, but this is what the Democrats do. This is an anatomy of a hoax. We've gone through here and talked extensively this week about the beginnings of the Russia collusion hoax. I've played a lot of clips, and one thing that they have in common is people are asking questions about Russia. People are asking questions. It's a way of introducing something without actually coming out and making the allegation. The reason the Wall Street Journal, which has been sued by Trump, has a problem, a legal problem, is because that actual malice standard I talked about with Candace Owens, the First Lady of France, may actually be satisfied by virtue of them printing an entire story about some card that Trump allegedly drew for Epstein for his birthday that was body spelled with a W in there somewhere, body, racy, whatever. And then they were like, whoa, we don't have the card. We can't show we don't have it. It's not actually in our possession or whatever. If it turns out they never saw it, huge problem for the Journal. And then Anna Navarro and all these people sit around and just go, well, we're just asking questions. So here, Abby Phillip, who is the host, she's got to wrangle all these people in, although she's a kind of a busy too. You can see how they start to dance around this.
The Democrats have been trying to take down Trump with documents that they never used to take down Trump.
I'm sorry, they crippled almost his entire first term by convincing one half of the country that Russia stole the 2016 election. And Democrats still have it at all. Tonight, Fox News did a poll.
Speaking of accurate sources.
Are you calling into question the Fox News polling? Because it's generally considered to be very good. So here's the deal. They have his job approval. He's a little underwater. Of all the people who said they approve or disapprove of Donald Trump, only 1% mentioned Epstein as the reason. And the whole 1% was either Democrats or independents. This fantasy that Republicans or MAGA Nobody in the Republican Party is worried about this, and most of America is not worried about it.
Yeah, but that's not even the main thrust of the argument. I would say if you go back to people and begin asking Democrats or even some independents, what are the reasons that you don't like Trump? Many of them will come out and say in their top 3 things, not Epstein, but Russia, Russia, Russia. And the Democrats know this. They know that that was successful. I got to take a quick break and explain to you why I think I've been right consistently on this when we return. Sam Rajovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Rarely wrong, always right. Sam Rajovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the program. Sam at whatsrightshow.com is my email. Reach me there day or night, and I will get back to you eventually. I promise. And I know I still owe responses to some of you, so forgive me. All right. At What's Right Sam on X, formerly known as Twitter. My favorite place to hang out. I talked a lot about it yesterday. I got things to get to now, but if you're not on X, shame on you. Get on there now. Free account. Support Musk, who deserves a tremendous amount of credit for what happened last year in an extremely pivotal election. Now, all right. My theory, as I began to examine all of this stuff going on with Epstein, and one of the latest developments, of course, is that the Obama judge down there in Florida, the left-wing Democrat-appointed judge in Florida, refused to turn over the grand jury testimony, the records that were basically under that court's domain, and this would mirror the previous efforts by the courts to keep all this under seal, including up in Manhattan. So the application by the Department of Justice to have these records unsealed was denied, and so that saga continues. It's a predictable outcome, by the way. Now, I'm convinced that when we talk about the Epstein files, and I mean we, just colloquially as people, what we think we're talking about is some sort of, binders full of evidence. We interviewed Person X told us that Epstein had underaged victim 1, and procured her for money to famous person A. Here's what transpired, and it's corroborated by the witness statements of these 2 or 3 other people. That's, I think, what we think is in there. But what if the Epstein files look something like the Steele dossier? Look something like what the intelligence community, put together to get Trump? And what if it was so laughable and so flimsy that they couldn't even with a straight face bring it out in the last 4 years? Because if they did that, it would discredit their all other already flimsy cases that they had going against Trump at the same time. A lot of people, look, I'll come at it from the other angle. From the other end, if the evidence was half decent against Trump, if there was something there that was juicy, are you actually honest to goodness telling me that Merrick Garland, Joe Biden, Jack Smith wouldn't have used it? To me, a semi-credible accusation of being a pedophile is way bigger than being an insurrectionist, than being election denier, then being, all of the stuff that was the hoarding, secret documents that, by the way, you were president and had the power to declassify. The cases against Trump, no matter how hard Andy McCarthy cried and said that they weren't, they're actually, at the end of the day, were pretty flimsy, okay? They just were. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that in the Epstein files at the DOJ is something that implicates Trump. And it was so flimsy they couldn't bring it out, but they left it behind. And the moment they walked out of the building, and maybe they purged stuff out of there that protected the Clintons, and they purged stuff out of there that protected, big donors and that kind of thing. But they kept the flimsy little crappy thing on Trump. And then as soon as they were out the door, started goading everybody, including the media, to go talk about the Epstein files. And Trump's unforced error via Pam Bondi is having this like fake release with the influencers and here are the files, hoping it would go away. The difference between conservatives and Democrats is that we conservatives, for the most part, those of us on the radio and the media, social media, etc., influencers, I'm more of a micro influencer, quite honestly, but those of us that are that have any say and have a voice, we are capable of being critical of the administration that we voted for and that we support. The Democrats are not. The Democrats will all get in unison and declare that Joe Biden is sharp as a tack. Joe Biden is sharp as a tack. He got command of the room. He is absolutely A-OK. He is spectacular. He's on his game, and do it day after day, week after week, month after month, with an absolute straight face. So we Republicans, people got the binders, opened them up. They're like, there's nothing new here. And Pam Bondi's, I got more. They're coming. And they were on her desk. Oh, they're on my desk. And behind the scenes, and this, I think, was what was going on. They started going through this stuff, and they're like, this is laughable. This is a joke. It's got Trump all over it, but this is nothing. All this will do, this is like a second Russia collusion hoax. And Trump's probably yelling at people, you idiots, how could you do this and whatever, while publicly supporting Pam Bondi. They put him in a bad predicament. Pam Bondi spoke before the work was done. It's always a danger when you're a media person. You want to get out. You want to be in the news. Being smart is harder than, being cute. All right. So that's what I think happened. And that's why when I went on Twitter and what did I write? This was already over a week. And I said, this was my actual tweet from earlier in the month. I've been pondering the Epstein files. Okay. And I've reached the conclusion and I look at the Democrats' reaction, and I'm increasingly convinced of this scenario. The Biden DOJ deliberately ensured that the only file left behind was one falsely incriminating Trump, much like the Steele dossier, and planted it as a poison pill. Once discovered, it traps Trump in an impossible bind. Release it and face fallout from an apparent Democrat deep state collusion, or stall and be accused of a cover-up. It is a lose-lose scenario. Which is why Trump and Pam Bondi should have just never touched it. Should have read through everything, go, this is crap, and kept it classified and let everybody scream. In my opinion, right? But there is zero chance, and I mean absolutely zero chance, that anything in there actually credibly implicates Trump, because if it had, it would have been used. And the funniest thing now is to watch Democrats actually, and this is why why I am convinced that it was so bad that they couldn't use it, because it lacked so much credibility that it would have absolutely destroyed the slimmest of veneers of respectability that some independents still view Jack Smith with. If he had busted out a story like the Wall Street Journal one and try to use it as a criminal filing against Trump, I think it would have been a disaster. So something like this is going on behind the scenes. And Democrats, that's what I was getting at a second ago here, Democrats are actually posting things. There's one commentator, Sawyer Hackett, that said, my not so hot take, the Epstein files probably don't just name Trump, but include prosecutable criminal conduct, which Merrick Garland sat on for fears or over fears of politicizing the DOJ. Oh, yeah, that's right. Apparently, Merrick Garland was afraid of politicizing the DOJ. He was afraid. He was sitting on prosecutable, meaning actionable evidence that could have led to criminal charges and convictions against Trump for Epstein conduct. But he decided not to go with it because he didn't want, the DOJ wanted to remain all above board. Can you imagine saying that with a straight face? Welcome to the world of the Democrats. Sam Murjovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT, back in a moment. Hi, Sam Murjovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian behind the What's Right microphone. By the way, author Michael Wolff, who is a biographer of sorts of Trump's, written a lot of books, I think 4 or so about Trump, anti-Trump guy, kind of a hater, has concluded, by the way, he's written about this now, that Epstein, at the end of his run there when Trump was president, was terrified of Trump, and that one of the reasons why Trump's name likely is in the files is that Trump was the original whistleblower. And remember how Trump and Epstein, I have to keep coming back to this, how Trump and Epstein, the relationship dissolved actually in the moment when Trump found out that Epstein was trying to hustle, recruit, groom a young woman who was working at Mar-a-Lago as a locker room attendant. And, you know, whether it was Ghislaine or whoever that was started bringing this girl over to Epstein's house and in Palm Beach, and Trump found out about it, lost his mind. So, and he may very well have called the police. So when Ana Navarro on CNN goes, well, I just want to know. Yeah. Asked and answered, Ms. Navarro. Been there, done that. By the way, great news from California today, and I say this as a former Californian. The Ninth Circuit has ruled that California's ammo background check regime violates the Second Amendment. Believe it or not, in the state of California, you have to pass a background check every time you go buy ammo. So hopefully this is a message, again, that California, in just this way, in many ways, continues to go too far. Yesterday was the sentencing of the quadruple murderer in Idaho. And this was, I mean, obviously this case now has become quite famous. I won't get into it too much, but there was a victim impact statement, a couple of them that really stood out. The sister of Kaylee Gonzalez, who is one of the victims, just gave a very eloquent victim impact statement. I wanted to share it here. Her name is Olivia Gonzalez. And here is what she said.
You didn't win. You just exposed yourself as the coward you are. You're a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser who thought you were so much smarter than everybody else. Constantly scolding, turning your nose up to grammar mistakes, nitpicking and criticizing others. You wanted so badly to be different, to be special, to be better, to be deep, to be mysterious. Don't ever get it twisted again. No one is scared of you today. No one is intimidated by you. No one is impressed by you. No one thinks that you are important. You orchestrated this like you thought you were God. Now look at you, begging a courtroom for scraps. You spent months preparing, and still all it took was my sister in a sheath. You work so hard to seem dangerous, but real control doesn't have to prove itself. The truth is, the scariest part about you is how painfully average you turned out to be. The truth is, you're as dumb as they come. Stupid, clumsy, slow, sloppy, weak, dirty. Let me be very clear. Don't ever try to convince yourself you mattered just because someone finally said your name out loud. I see through you. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your ass. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, people, this, by the way, was followed by the mother, Christy Gonzalez, mother of Kaylee, who had a quick message from their youngest daughter. I mean, I don't know. You can imagine how you feel as a parent, losing your child and losing your child in such an absolutely horrible way. My wife and I watched the documentary, by the way, the one that's on Prime, and it's almost, we almost had to at the end disassociate from it completely, because the fear that you have as a parent that something like this could possibly, the evil like this exists, it could happen to your kids, is impossible. You'd just be crippled as a parent. You never let your kids go anywhere. You just keep them at home forever. So anyway, just had this horrible reaction to it. But here is a great moment, perhaps one of a slight levity, where during the victim impact statements, the mother shared something from their youngest daughter, and it was this.
Quick message from our youngest daughter. Aubrey wanted to say, you may have received A's in high school and college, but you're going to be getting big D's in prison.
Not from the First Lady of France, we should note. Okay. By the way, Robbie, why are you today? What, you dress like Fidel Castro? Is he trying to tell me something? I don't know, guys. Producer Robbie, he is a urban cowboy. I'd say how I would describe him. His at least his attire. He's, if you've seen the Royal Tenenbaums, yeah, yeah, right. What was the name of that oh my gosh, now the actor's name is falling out of my head. What is it? Yeah, Owen Wilson. What was the name of his character? And he's one of the brothers. Or no, he's a friend of the family, right? He's a friend of the family. And he's he just lives in New York City, and he's always dressing as a cowboy, and he's like a poet or something. So he's wearing cowboy hats and Western gear. And that's Eli Cash. Great character. If you haven't seen Royal Tenenbaums, well, you have to be into that kind of. I love all those movies. But anyway, so that's Robbie. But today he looks like he's about to go through some sort of jungle somewhere in South America and start a revolution. What? Oh, you're getting Mamdani's attention. Okay, well, I hope so. Excellent. I hope that's working out for you. So we'll get to that. Well, I gotta get an update here during the break. I have to say, all right. So I don't know. You see that Graham and Cornyn are calling for a special counsel now in the Obama case. Anything that Lindsey Graham and John Cornyn of Texas, another rhino, are calling for, I immediately am suspicious of. It might as well be Democrats asking for it. So I've gotten some emails here saying we want a special counsel. Do we? Because my biggest fear, right, is you bring in another John Durham that spends years investigating, millions of dollars, and at the end of the day, what? Doesn't even get a conviction, and justice, is delayed and ultimately denied. I have concerns about a special prosecutor. By the way, it's not really an independent counsel. That statute doesn't exist anymore. And if you give it to the wrong person, this thing will just spin out of control. I mean, I know you're prosecuting potentially a former president. And by the way, the more that you pay attention and read between the lines of what is being said out there, I'm convinced that that's exactly what's going on. As we speak, there is a case being put together against Barack Obama. Well, Obama, and Brennan and Comey and the whole gang, but all the way up to and including the former president himself. Look, Jack Smith was never independent. Giving him that position, I think, was done to separate after the Mar-a-Lago raid, sort of give some veneer of credibility to the train they were running on the president and his allies. But I never, it never convinced me personally that the whole matter was above board. Oh, I feel tons better. And Trump will always remember appointing Mueller. He'll come back to that. That was the moment. I would talk about this when we come back. It's so important. This will be a important moment, a fork in the road, if you will. Sam Murjovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Greetings and welcome to the What's Right Show, your place for common sense conservatism, Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m., here on News Talk 840 KXNT. So this call here, this demand by John Cornyn of Texas, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, 2 rhino senators for the DOJ to appoint a special prosecutor to the Russiagate hoax, now well established via documents released by the administration, I think smells a little funny to me. And I think, I was just saying before the break how the minute that you have 2 rhino senators like Cornyn and Graham agreeing on something, that it raises my suspicion levels by a notch or two. And, Robbie, remember Mueller? How it all started, right? Mueller, Trump and Russia collusion, all this stuff. By the way, this is actually now dealing with the subject matter, the fallout of the hoax perpetrated by Obama and his cabal of miscreants. Sessions folded like a cheap suit. Sessions then, basically they appointed, the Mueller guy. Well, Rosenstein, first Sessions recused himself. Rosenstein comes in. He appoints a special counsel because special counsels are used where there's a conflict of interest. Now, a conflict of interest there was to investigate something internal against Trump. And Trump fell for it because he goes, listen, I have nothing to hide. I'm not colluding with Russia. He knew he wasn't colluding with Russia. It's like, here, look at me. Give me a clean bill of health. And what was the problem? The minute that Mueller got appointed, the minute that the fix was in, from that point forward, what happened? The investigation, instead of finding any of this stuff, which presumably they could find this stuff easily and had access to it, they basically said, well, there's no way, we didn't find conclusive evidence. And they sort of issued, after a long, protracted investigation, a report that, cleared Trump. But it dragged on for so long that it did untold political damage. May have very well cost Trump, the Republicans, the midterms. The Republicans that were in office at the time in Congress were almost more happy to be in the minority and to hand the speaker's gavel back to Nancy Pelosi, as long as it did political damage and Trump was injured. They hated Trump In other words, more than they hated Nancy Pelosi and congressional Democrats. And I think that's what's cooking here. I would absolutely resist this. By the way, the last true independent counsel was who? Because now we have special counsel. The original statute has expired. So they're, Jack Smith, for example, special counsel. Doesn't mean he's truly independent. The way the last true independent counsel was, who was named Ken Starr. Now, Ken Starr was appointed, Ken Starr is known for having discovered the Monica Lewinsky-Bill Clinton affair. That's what Ken Starr was known for. The little blue dress that had the president's material on it. Deposits, if you will. But the first deposits that Ken Starr was looking for were the ones made in banks over a little real estate deal known as Whitewater. And that investigation evolved and devolved and turned into a big, giant mess, right? And as we say, the rest is history. Two things need to happen here. Number one, this investigation needs to move quickly. Time is a ticking, and Democrats need to be brought to account, right? And this needs to all be documented publicly, I think, well in advance of the midterms. So that's one thing. And an independent counsel, special counsel, whatever you call it, is not going to achieve that. And the second thing is, right, there needs to be really strong oversight by the Department of Justice, by Trump, so that this investigation and prosecution isn't hijacked by Republicans, Washington, D.C. insiders, who were from the beginning complicit in this. I think one of the most, we obsess, and rightly so, we obsess about the criminal acts of Obama, Brennan, Clapper, Comey. But one thing that ought to also incense us is that so many Republicans, rhino Republicans, anti-Trump Republicans that were in D.C., some who we have periodically perhaps even admired and voted for, were complicit in this. I think that's a huge part of the story. Republicans were cheering this on. Republicans turned a blind eye. Trump's own DOJ and so-called political allies, even administration officials like Pompeo, ignored this, hid it even from Trump. If you think back to one of the very first things Trump did when he came to office, is he stripped Mike Pompeo of his security. Remember, I was talking about this a little bit, and I said, I just would hate for the Iranians to take Pompeo out. And I can also tell you that I have, on a couple occasions, specifically been inconvenienced by Mike Pompeo's security detail. I can tell you about this. Tried to park at a hotel once. Excuse me, we got to move. Clear the way, these guys. They're from the protective detail, and find out it's Mike Pompeo. Anyway, just a side note. Not that I'm grousing about it, but I do keep score. At any rate, a lot of money. I thought, okay, it's starting to be clear to me that Trump knows Pompeo is an absolute total scumbag. It became clear to him that Pompeo absolutely knifed him in his last term. Pompeo had some pretty important positions when Trump was first president. And it's now fairly clear that Pompeo would have had all of this, that would have had access to all of this information. And he may not have even let his own DNI have access to this information. Ratcliffe, a lot of people are saying, well, Ratcliffe was now the CIA director. He was DNI in Trump's first term, and so basically having Tulsi Gabbard's position. But it would have been the director of the CIA, who was then Pompeo, who could influence what even Ratcliffe could see. And that's again, you're going to find out it's not just Democrats that are implicated in this. And so appointing an independent counsel, special counsel, right, to investigate this, presumably that person's going to be some sort of a Washington person, right? A lawyer, prosecutor, would have ties to these people, could be subject to influence. There is not one single Washington, D.C. insider lawyer that is not susceptible to influence from either Democrats or Republicans. Independent exists on surveys, and when you ask people who give answers and don't like to commit or make enemies, but it doesn't exist in Washington. All right? It's unicorn, right? In the wild. Woo, there's a unicorn. Yeah, there's an independent in Washington. Woo. Doesn't happen. Oh, don't tell me. Independent. Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, occasionally somebody leaves, the Democratic Party, Republican Party, becomes an independent. They caucus with the party, don't they? There's no such thing. All right. So I am absolutely concerned from top to bottom about an independent counsel, special counsel being appointed. So that said, by the way, speaking of the intel, in one of the batches of documents that was released by Tulsi Gabbard, you can see that John Brennan, snuck in the hoax Steele dossier into an intel report, and he gave it a TSCI label. And by classifying it as TSCI, no one was able to debunk it because it was considered to be sort of the highest level of credibility. Brennan's the guy, it looks like, that originally took, and assuming it was done right after the meeting, the Oval Office meeting with Obama on the 9th of December in 2016, when they go, okay, now we are going to build our case against Trump. And lo and behold, newspapers, friendly media outlets, the drive-by media begin to en masse report on elements of the story. And miraculously, these newspapers, these media outlets, these guys are reporting on things before the vaunted intelligence is even printed internally at Langley. This is wonderful stuff. They were making it up as they went along. It all goes back to that original sin. All goes back to Hillary Clinton, to 2016, to the Steele dossier, to Fusion GPS. This is just, folks, we're just skimming the surface of this. An enormous scandal of epic proportion. Sam Murjovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT, back in a moment.
The Salmon Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
Greetings, friends. Welcome back. Sam Murjovsky here, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian behind the What's Right microphone. So, seeing another crop of complaints all over the internet about how Vegas is going into the toilet, meaning for visitors, the Vegas experience. Prices are up, quality of rooms and user experience down, and Trump is getting blamed for it. I'm seeing a lot of this. And there's something, I addressed it a little bit the other day, but it keeps popping up. And there are some bloggers here in Vegas who, while normally cheerleaders for our town, are also liberal. And because they're liberal, they can't resist an opportunity to, punch Trump when they can. And then it gets picked up, of course, by national media. And pretty soon you've got the story that Trump is causing a major downturn in Vegas. And by the way, none of these dingleberries ever came out and slammed Obama when he said, don't visit Vegas. If you're a company, don't visit Vegas. Austerity measures. While he himself was living high on the hog as president. Remember that? I do. Okay. Let me explain something to you. And I had a fascinating conversation yesterday with an executive here in town who will remain anonymous for the purposes of this discussion, but it's somebody perhaps some of you might recognize, a name you might know. Now, with that said, the number one pickle that the Strip, for example, hotels on the Strip got themselves into, well before Trump was in office, even the first time, is that they have sold their physical properties. Some Caesars, for example, MGM, they've sold their real estate, the earth and the building, to these real estate investment trusts. They're called REITs. And one of the big ones is Vici Properties. And so Vici owns the real estate. And the reason they did this is, would seem pretty obvious. They, one of the deals that they did was, I think, for $17 billion in 2022. So that was in the midst of the Biden disaster post-COVID, right? Remember, we got shut down. Does anybody? Oh, yeah, okay. I don't think that was, all right, got shut down. And then, recovering from that obviously was kind of crazy. So they had a lot of debt, and it was a way to, to pay off some debt and get some liquidity. So what happens is when these real estate trusts like Vici own the land, there's these rent escalators. Every year the rent goes up by 2 or 3%. And they've got this giant nut. If you're the operator, you have very thin margins. You got this big rent payment that you have to, give the real estate trust. You've got escalating wages, not because of immigration enforcement. I mean, that hasn't affected this yet, but because you have the unions have a stranglehold on the Strip. Everybody's unionized. You've got all these contracts. You've got constant renegotiations, more money, more money, more money. And then, of course, right, even if the rooms, you can sort of get people in with some decent rates on rooms, the restaurants have, over the past 4 years have pay a lot more for everything, right? Food, etc. So costs are up, right? Companies are not immune just because they have big buying power. So their costs are up. It's a recipe for a diminished experience. And in the middle of this, there is a very real squeeze. We talk about this, I've mentioned this with Disney. I don't understand how people can go, any, normal working family can go on a Disney vacation. It's insane. I mean, you figure a week, or 5 days even is thousands of dollars. Just the park tickets, the food, lodging. I mean, the cost is, and people were coming out of the pandemic. People were spending money like crazy because everybody had their free money, the free money that got helicoptered into the economy. Biden, Sandy Claus came in, parachuted in, and throwing money around like it was going out of style. And so prices, of course, shot up. And, obviously, right, when we're talking about the Strip and visitation tourism, immediately after COVID or the shutdown ended and Sisolak finally, was it like the 2nd of June in 2020, finally lifted it, right? Trump was screaming, everybody's going, reopen America, reopen. And Sisolak, is doing this was a former governor guy. Sisolak was a former governor of Nevada, a Democrat, before Lombardo. And the reason Lombardo won and Sisolak lost in large part was because Sisolak, number one, is a moron. Number two, his whole shutdown here was so protracted, and the guy was just listening to what people were doing in California. He's calling every day over to Sacramento. Oh, what are you doing? already, and following right the lead of a state that really shouldn't be followed in much of anything. So so we came out of it. Hotel rooms at first were ridiculously cheap, and they quickly shot up when people started having a lot more disposable income. It's supply and demand, right? There's a fixed number of inventory rooms. People were spending a lot of money. They were going on vacations. They were getting out. Pent up demand. And then the money ran out, right? Year one, people had cash. Year two, they had credit. Year three, they still had a little credit. Year four, we're running on fumes. Now people simply can't do it. So one thing that this executive told me about Vegas that's a little bit inside knowledge, and I'm not going to say what hotel he's with, but one of the things that is definitely true is that the higher end properties are killing it. They're doing fine. The people that have money are spending it. So properties, you can imagine, like the Wynn, for example, and this is not with the Wynn, I'll tell you that. The Wynn is doing very well, I would presume, because they're a higher end property. The lower end, the lower tier is getting destroyed. And that's a function of the Biden economy. We're now feeling the pain. And one thing that we absolutely have to do is fix something at the Federal Reserve. We got to lower rates. Rates are too damn high. And the Fed suddenly, is being extra, hawkish and careful because, of course, they despise Trump and want to injure Trump as badly as they possibly can so that the economy is wrecked in time for the midterms. It's all political. And so, again, is it Trump's fault? I would argue the only way it's really truly Trump's fault is that the Federal Reserve is rooting against Trump and would gladly sacrifice our economy here in Vegas, the whole country's economy, in fact, just to inflict damage on their least favorite president. That's a fact. Sam Mirjovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Welcome to the What's Right show. Sam Mirjovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Thank you for tuning in as always. And by the way, just received some great emails, and I appreciate your support so much. I really, this show wouldn't be what it is without each and every one of you. And I know you're out there even when I don't hear from you, and it encourages me, gets me up and at this every day that I get behind the What's Right microphone and do this program. So thank you. Appreciate that. Sam@whatsrightshow.com is my email. At What's Right Sam on X, formerly known as Twitter. Lara Trump has announced that she's out of the running for the North Carolina Senate race, writing on X, after much consideration and heartfelt discussions with my family, friends, and supporters, I've decided not to pursue the United States Senate seat in North Carolina at this time. I'm deeply grateful for the encouragement and support I have received from the people of my home state, whom I love so much. Now, NBC is reporting that Republican National Committee Chair Michael Whatley has intentions to run for that Senate seat, so we will see how that transpires. Also, the House GOP is launching a new select subcommittee on the J6 attack. It's according to Politico. The effort will be led by Barry Loudermilk, has been stalled for months over a disagreement about jurisdiction, but the White House apparently intervened, and Loudermilk was granted power as its chair to issue subpoenas, to compel testimony, etc. Now, I like that Politico here writes that the focus of the probe was not immediately clear. I think it's pretty clear to me what's going to happen here. I think the entire House Select Committee on the January 6th, insurrection that was put together by the Democrats, it was a sham. And by the way, they destroyed a lot of evidence, hid things. And I think, again, that's another hoax that has to be, where people need to be held to account. Of course, many of them have been pardoned by the auto pen, of course. So, I'm going to get to this. I promise, Robbie, there's a crazy situation unfolding in the United Kingdom. And remember, it all comes down to free speech, which is why, I tell you, one of the best things that we have going for us here in the U.S. is our First Amendment, and that repeatedly throughout history, we have individuals brave enough to speak out and to do something significant, even in the face of great opposition. And I mean by that, for example, Musk's purchase and liberation of X, the platform I'd frequently tout. Now, X, by the way, in some countries in Europe is all but banned, and you get all sorts of problems with or constant lawsuits and limits and throttling and things like that, because of course much of Europe is highly illiberal when it comes to free speech, and these countries have all tried to force through mass immigration schemes, and they've been largely successful, flooding European towns, villages, cities with all sorts of migrants from bad places. And the problems that have come from that have been significant. Now, the Telegraph wrote an article about Tony Blair, how this was funny, that Tony Blair, the former prime minister, had a secret plan to make immigration more popular. Basically came up with a marketing plan to sell the public on a highly unpopular plan that the government had, where they first were importing people from Eastern Europe. And of course, when the Eastern Europeans stopped coming, they started importing people from Syria. Yeah, so, first they got Poles and Czechs, which was fine, and then you just got worse from there. So anyway, there was a news story here from GB News that a Syrian migrant raped a girl, 12 years old, above a shop where he had been working illegally. It was a grooming attack. He's an asylum seeker. His name is Mohammed Wahid Mohammed. And he was convicted after a jury found him guilty of 3 rape charges. Now, this has obviously incensed some people back in Great Britain. They're mad about this. And they actually have had some protests and then counter-protests. And apparently, the police helped bus in the pro-immigrant, pro-Islamist protesters. So here is Nigel Farage, who is a voice of sanity over there, talking about this today on TV.
But I learned some things over the last 2 days that led me to put out a video this morning saying I thought it was absolutely astonishing that the police should have bussed a group called Stand Up to Racism, who had within them Antifa, who we know to be an openly violent organisation. What were they doing bussing them from the station to the Bell Hotel? Well, I got a phone call back from a police officer who was in charge of a situation that night to say I was wrong. They didn't bus them to the protest. They walked them to the protest and they bussed them back later. So if I was slightly out on accuracy, I apologise, but I think the gist of what I was saying was right. Did it make any sense to escort those people to a protest? Because as soon as they arrived, that's when the trouble and the violence started. So there is clearly a debate around, did the police actually in some ways cause the violence? Could they have said don't go, or would that have been countering people's rights? What I also asked the senior police officer was, why did you allow people to wear masks? Surely anybody that turns up for a protest wearing a mask is not, from either side of any argument, is not going with the best of intentions. The answer I got was they didn't have the right operational order to tell people not to wear masks. From what I can see of it, these counter-protesters, Antifa among them, some with masks on, were given the red carpet treatment to and from the Bell Hotel.
You know what this is all about? The police are being used by the British government to ship in anti-free speech, opposition protesters to Brits coming out who are mad at the government. And they're using them to intimidate and to silence expressions of discontent with those that are in power. This is absolutely despicable. Government doesn't want you in Great Britain to point out all the ways that they have absolutely destroyed the country. And if you go out there and start complaining that 12-year-olds are getting raped by migrants, what do? They bring in violent thugs to shut it down, using the police to escort them there and take them in buses back. Now, for their part, the police chief there at the Essex Police Department, Ben Julian Harrington, held a press conference yesterday categorically denying this, but he sounds a little weaselly.
Do you accept that your officers have given a higher level of protection to one side of the demonstration? And do you also accept that in the accusation being made today that those officers' actions caused some of the violence?
No, I don't accept that. The only protection that officers are doing is to those lawful and law-abiding people, whether they're in that accommodation, whether they're the people of Epping, or whether they are people who are standing there, as I've seen and you've seen the footage, standing there, with placards and banners wishing to make a very important and legitimate view, whichever your views about it. Where officers have intervened, that has because there has been disorder, there has been threats, or there has been the fear and concerns of those threats. And as I said at the beginning, that is exactly what policing will do, and we will step forward to do that. We are not being partial in any way, shape or form. If you're here to protest peacefully and lawfully, we will allow you. It's not us giving permission, it's you are exercising your legitimate rights. Where you break the law, that is where we'll intervene.
Okay. Well, so we are just there defending people's right to protest by sending in violent thugs to a peaceful demonstration? Is that what the police are now doing? This is awful. Arguably, right, the crucible of democracy in the West, and certainly an influence on our system, the British system was. It's devolving into this. Listen to this guy.
Why did your officers escort counter-protesters, some wearing masks, towards what appeared to be a largely peaceful demonstration?
Well, officers, people have got the right to turn up and protest where they're peaceful and lawful. And that is exactly what they'll do. People made their own way to this location. And we saw that, and we've seen the footage, and I know my officers were there. They had committed no crimes at that stage. And of course, officers properly were monitoring those groups to ensure that there was no confrontation and disorder. That's what they do. That's what you see at many protests and demonstrations, and that's exactly what they do. And I want to stress, where people have clearly committed offences, we have intervened and we've made arrests. And the record of the courts and the people charged is clarity of that.
But didn't that tactic risk a confrontation?
I'm not good. Every tactic and every intervention in a public order situation has pros and cons, has choices and consequences.
Well, this is all weasel words, right? It is a cautionary tale how elections matter and how a country like Great Britain has absolutely turned into a toilet because of mass immigration, people being pumped into the country by a government intent on destroying its own culture. If this sounds familiar, well, all we have to do is think back a year or so when Biden was president. Now, the culture part of this matters. When we come back, I want to mention a word or two about this. What happens when you import so many people that it becomes illegal to just be you? That's kind of crazy, isn't it? Sam Rajovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT, back in a moment. Sam Rajovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the show. Sam at what'srightshow.com is my email, at What's Right Sam on X, formerly known as Twitter. So culture matters. Talking about the United Kingdom here and how it's just completely devolving into some crazy place where right is wrong, wrong is right, importing a bunch of people into the country that are doing tremendous harm. You look at the statistics. You look at the number of rapes, for example, committed by people who are fresh arrivals to the country, who come from these countries where this behavior is normal. It's a shock. Like, oh my gosh, it's happening, but you can't criticize it because you have hate speech laws. If you go out there and say, hey, it's a problem, you know, that all these people who are coming from Syria or coming from North Africa, coming from the Arab world, are committing a disproportionate number of the rapes in the country, you are now saying things that cause offense to a minority group. You get arrested. I've talked a lot about freedom of speech over the years here on this program, and I frequently have gone back to a time when I first was on air and there was this big movement, this big push to create safe spaces on college campuses. Remember this? And the entire premise of it was that the offense of hearing something negative that would injure you was enough to prevent the speaker from saying it. Because it first started safe spaces and then eventually got codified into, you know, student handbooks, et cetera, at college universities. You couldn't say anything because if somebody was offended, then you were basically charged with a violation. This is what the left wants to do. They want to say that words hurt. And then, of course, it's subjective what words hurt. They can decide what words they can ban. Now, the First Amendment doesn't allow this to really happen, and that's why there's been a lot of pushback to it in the country, and it's not gone very far. But in Great Britain, in Germany, and other countries, in Europe, in the West, this is exactly what the left does. This is what the people in power do. They silence dissent by saying, your words are hurting somebody, thus we will prevent you from saying it. And it's gotten to such a point that even a little girl, 12 years old, showed up to school, to Multicultural Day or whatever the hell this was, wearing a dress with the British flag. Now remember, I've told you that people in Great Britain have gotten arrested for waving British flags, because they're waving it in front of Muslims, whatever, and those people are offended by it, and so they're causing distress to a minority group, ... It's happened. This is not a made-up story. This little girl gets in trouble at the school for wearing a dress with the Union Jack, with the British flag. Doesn't this sort of remind you when you hear liberals getting all angry when they see American flags? How dare you have an American flag? This is exactly what it is. Imagine a country, a place where liberals got their way. Well, I give you Great Britain, folks.
For Culture Day, I decided to wear my Union Jack dress to represent the music and the nationality where I come from. It made me feel proud, it made me feel confident. All my friends were saying, oh my god, what a great dress. I walked in and my teacher was like, oh, is that like Ginger Spice? I was like, yeah. It felt normal, I felt proud, yeah. The first teacher I saw, she straight away just took me to go get changed. She didn't want to hear about my dress or see it. She just straight away wanted to get changed and not be in it. Another teacher tried to stop me and said that you can't be in that, it's your nationality and not your culture. And some other girl who was wearing her family tradition like rugby top got told to change as well. They asked me to come with them and to change into second-hand school uniform, and then they said that I didn't sign a form when the head of year did ring my mum and she said she did sign it, yet they still didn't want me to wear it.
This is devastating. Cute little girl here, if you are watching the Sam Cam, 12 years old. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and she would do something like this for sure. So, of course, the girl's dad was very upset by all of this.
I went to the school, pick her up, see daughter, who's, she's a grade A student, and she's sat in reception like she's being punished for something. She wasn't allowed in school. She wasn't allowed to take part. The school wasn't willing to read her speech. They weren't interested in anything she had to say. She was literally put out to one side and treated like she was doing something wrong. And you could see in her face, she didn't, she was upset. It's terrible because this is a 12-year-old child's interpretation of what British culture is to her. So, for example, mine would be perhaps a man with a pinstripe suit and a bowler hat, drinking a cup of tea. A 90-year-old person's might be something else, but this is a 12-year-old's representation of what British culture means to her, and she was silenced and she was shut down, and she wasn't the only one. There was other kids there, and for me, these kids need to be proud of where they come from, and they need to learn about and share their experiences about their culture. And it happens too often these days. People are told to, take your flag down or be quiet. It's not about you. It's not about your culture. It's about everybody else's.
Shut up. Let your country get invaded. Don't fight back. And if you dare be patriotic, if you dare try to say there is a distinct British culture or a distinct American culture, German culture, whatever, you are a Nazi. You're a bigot. You're a racist. How dare you? It used to be that people emigrated, left their countries, immigrated into new countries, and assimilated. But these new invasionary forces don't do that. They're roaming the world, spreading their disgusting way of life, and complicit liberals are allowing it to happen because they sense from it renewed political power. It's absolutely tragic. Now, the schools apologized, of course, but remember, this is what happens when you turn over education to the government in the first place.
I think I got a phone call Sunday evening with an apology from the school, and they did a complete U-turn. And they have apologised, and they have realised that they've done something wrong, but this still happens in schools, and this still happens to British kids. If this happened to anybody else, there'd be an uproar about it.
Damn straight. I tell you, if it happened to me and my family, they wouldn't hear the end of it. Stay vigilant, folks. The same people that are wrecking Europe are here in our country too. The same politicians, the same mindset. They tried it under, Biden. They tried it under Obama. We are so fortunate to have Donald Trump as president. Sam Murchowski, News Talk 840 KXNT. See you tomorrow, folks. Be well.